again. And next up, we have a panel discussion on careers in space sustainability, and especially on the early stages of them. We have half of our panel here, and the other half is remote, and we have a remote chair who is Chiara, and I shall hand over to her now. All yours.
Thank you so much, Bob. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here with all of you, albeit virtually, but I'm very happy to be able to host this panel. So yes, my name is Chiara Moenter. I will be your host for this session today. And I am joined today by Julia Astley and James Blake, who are there live with you, and Jacob Smith here online with me. Our panel today is on careers in space sustainability, why space sustainability is a good career choice, and how to support those looking to enter this field. And with me, I have a wonderful and very knowledgeable panel who will share their experiences with you on this. Now, we've heard a lot about space sustainability yesterday and today. It's a very important topic, and careers in space sustainability is also something that is just very dear to my heart. So my background is in sustainability science and project management. And after my studies, I went on to co-found an initiative called SDG 18 Space for All, which calls for space on the global agenda for space sustainability and advocating for the importance of sustainable uses of outer space. I've also gone on to work as a journalist, as a space journalist, editor, and event coordinator at SpaceWatch.Global. And I'm sure you heard from Torsten Kriening, our CEO, yesterday. And currently, I am a young graduate trainee at ESA, working on policy, strategy, and communications. What struck me most in my journey and talking to a lot of people is that there is not one clear path to go to get a career in space, and there are so many more opportunities out there that we can even fathom. And still, there are gaps of space skills in the space sector. And before we start our panel, we actually have a very wonderful pre-recorded video from someone on exactly this topic. So Joseph Dudley, the director of the Space Skills Alliance, was able to pre-record a speech for us to kick off our panel on the topic of space skills. And he speaks about the space skills gap in the UK space sector. So can we play the video now, please?
Hello, my name is Joseph, and I'm director of a think tank and consultancy called the Space Skills Alliance. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person today. I've been asked to set the scene a little around the space skills gap in the UK, and more importantly, what we can do to address it. Now, the first question we've got to ask ourselves when talking about space skills is, what is a space skill? What do we mean when we talk about space skills? The answer, as with all things, is not a clear-cut one. Exactly what you include as a space skill is going to depend on your definition both of space and of skill. But to avoid us getting into questions of ontology, I'm going to annoy all of the engineers in the room, and I'm going to group technical space skills into 5 rough themes. Those engineering. Those are aeromechanical engineering, electrical engineering, systems engineering, maintenance, manufacturing and materials, and software and data. These themes come from the Spacecraft Competencies Framework that we released earlier this year. Some of them are specific to the space sector. Some are found across aerospace and defense. Others are common to almost all STEM-related fields. Now, of course, technical skills are by no means the only skills that we care about. The framework also includes transferable skills, and in fact, demand for these is higher than it is for technical ones. But since they're less specific to the space sector, and generally companies have an easier job recruiting for them, I'll talk about them less. Okay, so that's space skills out of the way. But since the title of this presentation is the space skills gap, the next thing that we need to address is the gap. How big is the gap? Well, In the UK, there are about 1,300 space companies. 75% of those are recruiting. And of those, about 70% are struggling to recruit. So taking those two numbers together, about half of all space businesses have skills shortages. This is a big problem. It is a major barrier to the growth of our sector. The next question we might reasonably ask ourselves is why? Why do we have this problem? And the answer, in a word, is tech. Let's have a closer look at those skills that we're asking for. These are the results of an analysis of about 800 space job adverts. Right at the top, we've got transferable skills, interpersonal skills, communication skills, analytical skills. As I've mentioned before, demand for these is very, very high. Number 3 on our list, the first of our technical skills, is software development, asked for by almost 50% of space jobs. And what about the rest of those technical skills? Well, down here at the bottom, we have the electronic skills at about 17%. And everything else, mechanical, aerospace engineering, these things barely feature. We graduate nearly 15,000 aerospace engineers every year. And even if the aviation industry hoovers up 99% of these, we're still left with plenty. Space grad schemes are massively oversubscribed. Now, our biggest problem is that as the downstream grows, as more and more upstream engineering work becomes computer-based, the core skills that we are looking for are exactly the same ones that everybody else is looking for. Programming, data analysis, machine learning. But we're not hiring computer scientists. 29% of people in the space sector have a degree in physics, compared to just 6% of computer scientists. We are competing with the tech sector. We are competing with Silicon Valley, and we are losing. The Edge Foundation estimates that there are more than 600,000 tech sector vacancies in the UK. That figure for space is perhaps 1,000 at most. We are a very small fish in a very big pond. Now, it's easy for us to put up our hands and say, well, what can we do in the face of all of this? After all, Facebook earns about twice as much as the whole UK space sector. But the answer is actually quite a bit. We in the space sector have a unique advantage, and that is that we have a 200,000-year head start on everybody else. That is how long there have been humans, and that is how long humans have been staring up in awe at the stars. Space inspires like nothing else. 86% of children and 75% of adults say that they are interested in space. It is no coincidence that the 2 richest people in the world made their billions in the tech sector and are choosing to spend it in the space sector. 42% of the people working in the UK space sector today are here because they like space. Not because of pay or career development or interesting problems, but just because they like space. This is a gift, but this unique advantage has also made us complacent. We have used it as a crutch to save us from the hard work of building a robust talent pipeline. And now that complacency is coming back to bite us. Our job adverts are poor. We scored 50 job adverts against 10 best practice criteria, like having a clear description of what the role entails and being free of gendered language. Only 4 got a score of more than 75% of 100. Our pay isn't competitive. The tech sector pays 10 to 20,000 more at all levels of seniority. Our workers experience discrimination. More than 40% of women in space report being discriminated against. And right now, the UK Space Agency is under review because 1 in 5 of its staff report having been bullied. We can do better. We must do better. Now, I'm close to my time limit, and I don't just want to be the guy who highlights the problems. The focus of the Space Skills Alliance is on solutions. So I'm going to throw out a few of our suggestions to prompt some discussion today. Last month, we set out 5 solutions to the space skills gap. They are not everything that the sector needs to do, but they are 5 things that we can do today that will have a big impact on our skills shortages. The first is to develop a space competencies framework, a common language to talk about these problems and develop progression pathways. You've already seen the first iteration of that. Second, we need to adopt best practices in recruitment, better job adverts, better hiring processes, more openness to non-traditional routes into the sector. Number 3, we need to create more opportunities for young people to gain experience. We have a lot of keen grads and not enough experienced people. So we need a fast track like the Civil Service Fast Stream or Teach First. 4, we've got to make it easy for experienced people to change careers and to come and join our sector. We have a lot of resources for graduates, but hardly any for anyone older. Finally, we need to make training more responsive and more accessible. 4-year degree courses no longer fit the bill. We need boot camps, we need micro-credentials, we need innovation. So let's share our problems and share our solutions, and together we can achieve more than if we go it alone. Thank you very much.
Now, although he cannot be with us today, I'd still like to thank Joseph for this great speech, and it gives a good tone for our discussion. Now, although he has focused his speech mostly on tech and generally the space sector, I would like to take this time for our panel to also expand beyond just careers in tech and really look at what we can do for space sustainability. Because this morning we heard from David Willix, who mentioned in his opening statement that space sustainability is realized not just through tech and through engineering, but there are so much more expertise and backgrounds needed. But enough from me. I'm very excited to hear from our panelists on the subject. When talking about working in space, I always find that it holds true that you don't find space, it's space that finds you. So I'd love to hear from my panel, how did you approach the space sustainability world? What's your background and how did you get where you are today? Tell us a bit about that. So I'd love to pass the floor to Julia Astley, a mission systems engineer at ClearSpace.
Thank you, Chiara. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Julia Astley. I'm a mission systems engineer at ClearSpace. For those of you not familiar with ClearSpace, we're a startup based out of Switzerland and London. We are focused on developing and operating satellites for active debris removal and other in-orbit services focused around space sustainability. Prior to joining ClearSpace, I worked for 3 years at OneWeb in ground segment operations and systems engineering. My academic background is I did physics and maths at undergraduate level, followed by a master's in space science and engineering. After that, I actually left the space sector. I had my first graduate job at Tesla. So I went straight into sustainability and then decided at a later point I wanted to come back into space. And I find myself now with a role which I think combines my passions for both sustainability and also space engineering.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Julia. I'd now like to give the floor to James Blake, who you've probably heard from today already. He's a research fellow at the University of Warwick Center for Space Domain Awareness and secretary for the GNOSIS network. James.
Thank you, Chiara. Yeah, so I'm James, for anyone that doesn't know me. And yeah, I've been at Warwick now for coming on to 9 or 10 years. I did my undergraduate here, postgraduate, and now a postdoc. Yeah, my undergraduate was in straight physics. I had a keen interest in astronomy throughout that, so that's my sort of original background, was in sort of mainly in the exoplanet side of astronomy. And then when it came to postgraduate level, I went into the SDA side with Don Polacco, who's with us today. And that's where the SDA activities at the University of Warwick sort of started out, at least on a full-time basis. So my PhD focused on optical imaging, mainly of satellite space debris. So we did a few surveys of the geosynchronous region. And so I guess I've been mainly involved from a technical perspective, that side, and mainly using our facilities in La Palma in the Canary Islands. So we've got quite a number of telescopes out there. which we're now sort of starting to repurpose quite a lot for the SDA work. As for my postdoc, I've continued similar work, and I've also continued as secretary of GNOSIS. So through GNOSIS, as well as being involved in a lot of the event management for conferences such as this and workshops that we run, I've been exposed to a number of the different sectors involved. So that's been very useful. So while I'll be coming at this panel mainly from an academic perspective, I hopefully have some perspective from the other sectors as well. So with that, I'll hand back to you, Chiara. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, we have Jacob Smith, who's a fellow young graduate trainee at ESA in development and coordination of space-related training. He's also the manager of SpaceCareers.uk and founder of Space Projects UK. Love to hear more.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Apologies I can't be here in person, but I'm very happy that I am able to join online. So thank you for the introduction, Chiara. As you said, I'm a fellow young graduate trainee. I've started a few months ago in the ESA Academy. So my background is in engineering. I studied mechanical engineering, did a master's in space engineering. I saw space sustainability become more and more prevalent and in studies. My master's was on a space debris removal mission, my project there. And throughout that time at university, I was involved in voluntary roles with SpaceCareers.uk and with UK SEDS in the more education, skills development side of things. So I started my career as a space engineer and have now moved into more provision of training opportunities for university students in a variety of topics. And a few of those courses that we run here include courses on space debris and different space sustainability topics that I can maybe mention a bit more later. But yeah, so I'm now carrying on with my space careers.uk work in my free time, and we are undergoing a big redevelopment project. So hopefully next year you'll see a brand new website and service that we're very excited to launch.
Fantastic, thank you. It sounds very exciting, and it is amazing to hear all your stories and backgrounds. So I have a lot of questions, but dear audience, this conversation is also for all of you. So please, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. So for those joining online, please feel free to post your questions into the Q&A section. I think you can also vote for other questions to be asked, and I'll try to get them in. And for everyone who are joining Julia and James in person, please feel free to indicate if you have a question. And I think the wonderful Bob Man will be around to take your questions for you. All right, then I think without further ado, we should just get started. Now, we've heard a lot also in Joseph's presentation about different skills, and I would be really curious from your point of view, what skills does the space sustainability world need? Maybe I'd like to start with Julia, since you've also worked in the sustainability field outside of space. What are skills that you think are really necessary?
Apart from general ones like being really good at communicating with other people about what sustainability means, I would say specifically for the space sector, awareness around demisability of materials and what the regulations are. So I, for example, during my master's, I had no idea what the disposal plan was for a low Earth orbit spacecraft. Only through working professionally do I now know that, and now working in design of missions where we really take that into consideration through all stages of the design process. Am I aware of it? But it would be really good to see that being talked about more widely. So not just within, aerospace engineering, maybe in materials or talking about components. That's where we need to, I think, bring it into the conversation. Like we're already having the conversations, but we need to bring demisability as a part of that conversation much earlier, I think.
Fantastic, thank you. Jacob, because you've talked about offering trainings for space sustainability, do you have any skills that you think would be in addition to what Julia has already mentioned?
Yeah, I think just to pick up on what was just said as well, we see that it's not just the courses, for example, that are run and the people who are working in the sustainability and this sort of company doing these actions. It's all people working in the sector in different engineering roles, for example, that need to bear this in mind and be aware of the different regulations and kind of putting into the design in the first place that the things that allow servicing in the future, for example, in the design of the spacecraft, So I think everyone needs to be aware. I think it's a very interdisciplinary sort of field. It's a new market, really. There's a lot of new opportunities, new markets coming about. So I think having an awareness of the policy side of things, and the engineering, and obviously all the market, the business cases, and I think it's going to require a lot of different people to work together to ensure that we can keep space sustainable. So, you know, if you're working in a policy related role, because this is kind of where it's all going to be driven from, and understanding of the engineering side of things is going to be very helpful. Likewise, if you're researching new markets and trying to work out business cases for debris removal, for example, I think an understanding of technical stuff is important, and vice versa as well. Everyone kind of needs to be able to work together and communicate. And I think, as what Joseph was saying as well, that some of the key skills are actually being able to communicate with each other, interpersonal skills. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you both touch on some very important factors, but sustainability as a field is very interdisciplinary and very interconnected in itself. Our skills also need to be as such. So communication, awareness, and interdisciplinary capabilities and thinking are vital. We'll touch on a bit of that later as well. I would also be interested in, for someone who's starting out, who wants to work in the space sustainability field with whatever position that might be, what are good resources that you would recommend? What information is needed in order to choose a career in this area? And I'd like to pass that over to James.
Thanks, Chiara. I think from my perspective, we've already mentioned boot camps and things in the opening recording, and I think the training camps at ESA as well, as we've said, are very useful. I did one for space debris a few years back, luckily before COVID, so I got to go in person. But yeah, that was really useful for me, because you get to meet so many different students from different disciplines and backgrounds. And the benefit of that is typically they're coming towards the point where they're looking for careers elsewhere, so in industry and so on. Perhaps some will stay in academia, and as a result, you end up with a whole host of contacts in various different places. And I think those boot camps and training camps, they're such a seed effect, if you like. You meet all the people that can help you in the future, and you know, when you come to look for a career yourself, or to develop your career yourself, having those contacts are just invaluable, really. So I would say that's probably my main recommendation, is the boot camps, the training camps that are out there, and also workshops. And you know, GNOSIS in particular have run a lot of virtual workshops, sadly, because again of the pandemic, we've had to be fully virtual for most of it. But I think those are really good for having snapshots of what research is going on, what different companies are working on. And again, that sort of cross-sector part of the problem is really tackled by having these events that bring all the people together under one roof, having the communication skills to be able to talk to somebody. If you're in academia, your priorities, shall we say, are probably very different to someone in the commercial sector. And again, even more different probably to those working in defence. So having those interpersonal skills to be able to chat to those different people, get a feel for what their priorities are, and how your different priorities interline, I guess, is key.
I couldn't agree more. I think, yes, contacts and networking are so vital in order to move forward, and again, to have this very interdisciplinary approach. Julia, do you have any other factors or resources that you would mention as well?
I think there's a lot of free resources out there. So James just mentioned, is this okay now? Yeah, okay. So as James just mentioned, there's free resources and boot camps that ESA run. What I find, it sounds really boring, but using things like ECSS standards to run simulations using free software. Like ESA release a lot of free software, like the ESA Drama tool, I think is probably very well known here. But yeah, things like that are available and out there. which is really good. I think also just being more open. Something I personally struggled with after leaving university was not having access to academic papers and resources. Everything's behind a paywall. And so if you're in the bubble, you have access to it and it seems obvious, but you don't realize how difficult it is to really make sense of things or what the latest technology is or the latest thinking is if you don't have access to things like that. And I think that's also part of inclusivity. I think sometimes in the industry, there's an assumption that people are going to be on a very academic path, that they are going to be the certain type of person who's done lots of internships, or they've been able to travel and do projects at different universities during the time. That's simply not the case. And in the UK, if we want to attract more people into the sector, we have to think about maybe those not so academic paths into the sector as well.
Yes, that's a very, very fair point to mention there. Yes, I think it would be quite interesting also to see what are ways that the space sector can make this path to get into space easier, maybe in terms also of how to communicate or what to communicate. Do you have any ideas on this, Jacob, of what could good improvement points be to also get young people into the space sector and into space sustainability?
Yeah, I think there's, in terms of attracting people and getting the right people in your organization, there's two kind of different ways of doing that. There's making sure they have the right skills. There's also making sure that you hire the right people that are the good fit for your team. And you've not got, say, you're choosing all the similar sort of people. You want a diverse range of people. So it's improving the recruitment processes, as well as then on the other side, upskilling your existing staff, or having other opportunities in the wider sector for those people applying to gain their skills in the first place before they apply to you. And I think there's different opportunities. There's obviously, when you're studying, there's lots of different options, internships, research projects, and as we were saying, then there's not always they're not available to everyone. I will just, if you don't mind, mention something that I set up a couple of years ago called SpaceProjects.UK, which is an opportunity because there's not a lot of space related universities. But this is kind of a scheme that matches students doing their final year undergraduate project or the master's project with companies who propose the project in the first place. So the student can be remote, they can be anywhere, they don't need to have a space program at the university, and it's a good way for the companies to kind of get in touch with some upcoming talent. Maybe they can hire them in the future, but also get some work done. And it could be any field. So I'm not sure who's in the audience, I can't really see, but hopefully there's some space sustainability related companies who'd be interested in kind of working with students and providing those skills earlier on in their career, because I think that's a kind of it's not very available for lots of people. And then just picking up on the other kind of entry route, which is for people from other sectors, which Joseph picked up on as well. And I think that's something we're really trying to push at SpaceCareers.UK, is providing more resources for people. We do have some interviews on the website with people who have made the transition from another sector, and I think it's really useful for people to see, to hear experiences from people. And as James was saying, networking is so key, but kind of seeing that it is possible. If anyone's done that, get in touch. We'd love to feature you on the website as well if you transitioned from a different sector. So I think those skills are so valuable. We do really need to attract people and be able to grow the sector. But yeah, we're looking to kind of provide more opportunities around that as well.
Sounds fantastic, and it does very much touch on another point that I wanted to bring up, which is how to also get people who are coming from maybe a predominantly non-space sector to engage as well. And Julie, I mean, you mentioned that you went into the sustainability sector and then back to space. And I was wondering, how do we get those involved in maybe predominantly Earth sustainability work, be it from a tech side or from a policy side or a law side, into the field of space sustainability, if we're talking about interconnectedness? How do we build this bridge?
It's a really tough question. In my mind, I think it's difficult because when we talk about space sustainability, for a lot of people, it's just not at the forefront of their mind. When we talk about Earth sustainability or Earth science sustainability, everyone knows the statistics. It's very well known. It seems like a bigger, more pressing problem. It feels like there's something that really needs to be done, whereas space can sometimes feel a little bit otherworldly, excuse the pun, in a way that I think makes it really hard to bridge that gap, always sort of seen as being a little bit too narrow-minded, I guess, in just thinking about space without thinking about it as a whole. Yeah, I think I'll leave my answer there because I'm not sure I have anything else that is good to say. Thanks, Chiara.
It is a tough question, I'm aware, and I think it's something that a lot of people are putting thought into and trying to bridge. James, do you have any idea, coming from a more academia side, how could academia help to bridge this gap?
I guess thinking about the extension to, of sustainability to space, I think one thing I'd quite like to talk about is the idea of starting that quite young, and without wanting to sort of track back to the panel yesterday too much, because I know that was focused on the young side, and this is early careers. But I really do think in terms of combining those two concepts of space and sustainability, having people exposed from quite a young age that is something to think about and something to consider as an important problem to tackle is really key. We had the school visit yesterday, pardon the plug, but it was really successful in the end, and the children were really coming up with some excellent ideas of how to conduct sustainable space operations. And at year 5, I was amazed really that the topic didn't seem too complex a problem to tackle. They really did have some imaginative ideas, and I think that just that starts to progress as you go through your university experience. If you go to university or even through an apprenticeship, those kind of early experiences are key to having a sort of end goal, if you like. Yes, we've got a question in the audience right now from Catherine, if I can pass over.
Thanks, James. Sorry to interrupt, Chiara, the flow of questions. I'm just sitting here reflecting on the fact that actually a lot of people in their early careers may not have the confidence to feel that they can be agents of change within their employer's culture. But actually, I would really like to hear the reflections from the panelists about that, because, you are the ones who have kind of overcome the hurdles and beaten your way into a career path that you obviously feel passionate about. And I get a sense that I don't hear you feel you have much agency to change the way others coming behind you will have to struggle up through the same swimming upstream experience. But actually, you have an enormous power of sharing your insights within your organizations in order to, get those employers to think about how they make that an easier journey, or how they communicate to a wider audience about the opportunities of employment there. So I guess my question is, how do you make your voices heard as an agent for change within your employers so that they can actually reach, more young people and draw them in? Julia, I'm going to start with you because you're the nearest to the mic.
Thank you. So I think I've got to admit, I feel like I'm preaching with the choir. I work for an organization that's really passionate about sustainability, and it's our whole ethos. So I don't feel like I need to really shout to be heard. And it's sort of, we're all already on that same page. So yeah, but I think in terms of what I can do outside of my organization, or maybe thinking about the pipeline of other young people maybe coming into the sector, is really make it seem exciting. I can really talk about how the missions are really groundbreaking that I work on, and that these will be, the technology we work on now will be the building blocks of the in-orbit sustainability initiatives that will come for the next 20, 30 years. And it's really maybe where we were 10 years ago with other technologies that now seem really commonplace, like constellations. In the next 10 years, we'll think of robotics and vision-based navigation and things like that as being, oh yeah, those are just the things we have on all the satellites now. But really, it's important to think of it as really exciting and groundbreaking to get in, and be part of that, which I think is how I can make it seem, really encourage people into doing it.
maybe we can pass on to James. Thank you for that question, Catherine. It is very interesting.
I think from an academic perspective, it's quite intrinsically tied with university outreach in general, and you know, making people aware that research is a viable career path. And I guess outreach like the school visit and organizing things like that is one way I would say I try to do it. And yeah, I'm open to hearing other ideas from other people. It's obviously a very busy career path in general, so it's difficult to find the time to do outreach such as this. But I think it is really key to do, and any sort of encouragement from institutions is very helpful with that. I just saw a hand from Will, so I'll pass over.
This is my job. I'm being wonderful.
Thanks. Will Feline from DSTL, so part of the Ministry of Defence. So some of the stuff that we do to support early careers people, I thought I'd highlight and maybe as examples, and I'm sure other people do better, but we have summer students, typically between A-level and degree, and come into us for about 3 months. And I think they like it because we pay them money. And they get to do something vaguely interesting that looks good on the CV. And from our point of view, it's really good because they're really cheap. We don't pay them much. And we get similarly year in industry students who stay with us for a year. And there are sponsorships available. And I know the cost of going through university is a little bit more than it was when I did. So I think supporting students financially is a really good thing that we do. We're also looking at increasing the number of PhDs we sponsor in various areas, which I'm really happy about, coming from an academic background myself. So I think those are all good things that we can do to support, and no doubt we can do more. We do outreach in schools as well. One thing, circling back to the first presentation on the skills list, when I recruit people, yeah, all those interpersonal skills, communications and stuff, they're all really interesting. But what I really want, what differentiates candidates from the others ones, are those scarce skills that are really hard to recruit, like RF engineers, spacecraft systems engineers, etc., that keep getting poached up by other companies. Those are the ones that are really key and important for me, and those points of differentiation that make the all those good applications we get makes one stand out. One young lady who joined us recently was president of the University Rocketry Society. So everywhere she went, she had to carry around a police note saying, yes, I've got explosives on me because I play with rockets all the time. That sort of thing was really attractive to us. Okay, that's all. That came across quite poorly, but you know what I mean.
Thank you very much for that insight. That is very valuable to hear. I would still love to give Jacob the chance to also.
There's another one in the audience here. If I just
okay, perfect. That's very good.
Hi, good morning, or I think it's afternoon now. I'm Harper Pablo. I'm a systems engineer from training. Is there a space professional institution? So I see a lot of people working in space, but they tend to go with Royal Aeronautical Society or IET, the bigger institutions. So if you had a space institution, doesn't need to be large, they could take on the capability framework and endorse it, and also recognize certain industrial skills that you're looking for. And I don't know if that's in development. A competency framework is fundamental. So those 5 points, I would say, apart from point 1, the others are industry-wide, they're industry-wide problems. So coming up with a space competency framework, you can leverage the key areas that you're interested in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this. I'm not sure if this was a question also directed to our panelists to see if there's already something out there. Okay. All right. I see there's another question.
There is. Hang on a second.
Oh, okay,
Maybe this way at speed.
We have Bob running around the room.
Hi, it's Portia here. I'm aware there's a National Space Skills Institute in development at the moment. I'm hoping to see the funding go through. I'm sure someone knows much more about this than me. But I do have another question for the panel. I personally have felt conflicted between working in space and working in sustainability. It's hard to see the impact that you have. And then Catherine's question earlier about how can you be an agent of change? It's quite difficult in space companies when, you know, they're quite slow moving. It takes a really long time, you know, to do anything in space. So I just wanted to ask, do you see this as a problem for recruiting in future generations? And what would your recommendations be to people in the audience today, or employers, organizations, or individuals in general that we could see to address this problem?
That's a great question. Thank you very much. Maybe we can pass this over to Jacob for a first answer.
Sorry, just to make sure I understood the question. So solving the problem of companies being slow moving and how to attract people to those.
Yeah, with the space, or with space sustainability being a very urgent topic, and then on the other side, space companies being quite slow moving, how to attract young people into this field if they want to be agents of change.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I don't have the answer, I guess, but I can maybe just throw some thoughts out there. I think young people these days are a lot more engaged in sustainability in general, and you know, you see all the things going on around the world in this sort of domain. And I personally as well also feel the same. Like, yes, supporting Earth and supporting Earth via space, it's two conflicting, well, but also in tandem sort of things. But I mean, I think in terms of attracting people, as we were talking about earlier, companies really need to get their face up there and attend university careers fairs and go and do school outreach, and because you know, career perceptions are formed at such an early age that it's important to get in there early. But I think that you know, it's gonna be very competitive. Companies who do work faster than the others will, I guess, naturally attract the early careers candidates towards them, and if they are providing good recruitment practices, you know, being inclusive and making sure that anyone feels comfortable working for them, and when they actually work there are wanting to stay and not encountering any difficulties in their work. I think that's really key to keeping people engaged. And then with that, you're going to naturally get, I guess, faster progress and more efficient work being done. A lot of the new like sustainability work, I guess, it's all new technologies, and you see very few companies working in this area right now, just by the nature of the fact that it is all kind of new, and a lot of the when this sort of happens, I guess the majority of the work is more in like academia, in research, PhDs. Once we kind of get an understanding of that, then it moves more into the industry domain. But yeah, it's definitely already there and it's growing. And I think we should definitely have more opportunities. There's a lot of, as we've mentioned before, there's lots of keen graduates in engineering, for example, and there's lots of oversubscription for those opportunities. So more needs to be created, I think, to get more people into it, and then I guess that would bring faster progress as well. Companies, as I think someone else in the audience mentioned, that it's difficult for you know, you want people who are coming in with the skills. A lot of companies don't have the time, especially the smaller companies, don't have the time to train these people up. And that kind of just slowly leads to a decline in the amount of people with these skills. You know, they spend a few years working in a sector, then might leave, and then there's no one to train them. The new people coming in. So I think there's definitely more that can be done to support smaller companies as well entering this industry.
That's a very good point to mention. I would like to also add on maybe a bit of a snarky thought to Portia's original question, which is, how do we see this career field of space sustainability developing? Is it going to be something that will really grow into like an established career, or is it going to be more of a trend? I mean, we see sustainability being quite trendy right now within a lot of businesses. Everyone is looking for a sustainability officer. But will that stay? Will this career path grow? How do you see that? Maybe over to Julia and James.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. The way I personally see it is, I think the goal of space sustainability isn't to become a sector just that's huge in and of itself, but to become ubiquitous across the industry, so that the aspects that we advocate for in space sustainability just become very commonplace and become routine, and it's not seen as separate. We don't want to set ourselves out as being not like everyone else. We want everyone else to kind of jump on board and get involved and understand what we're trying to do and really buy into it as well. Not just on a technology way, but in when you think about business plans or commercial activities, for them to really be like, yep, sustainability is the right thing to do, and here's why, and we're just going to do it. We're just going to get involved.
Yeah, I think I'd just echo that really. And you know, space sustainability by necessity isn't going to be a trend. I don't think. I think it's something here to stay for quite some time, and there will always be problems to overcome. As for the careers within space sustainability, I think a similar case, but as for what those careers might look like, or the different skills that are required, that might evolve over time as things progress. But generally speaking, I think it's not a trend. I think it's you know, something for long-term future as well. But yeah, I'm back to you, Chiara.
I'm happy to hear you say that. I also definitely hope that it is not just going to be a trend, but that there are going to be more jobs and a bigger career growth for this as well. Now, I'm a bit wary of the time, but I just wanted to check, are there any more questions in the audience over there?
Yes, there's one more over here. Here we go.
Fantastic. Then we'll have our final question.
Okay, thanks for that. What do you think we can do to give people who haven't worked in the space industry before, who are maybe mid-career, the confidence to apply for space industry jobs and bring the experience that they developed in other industries into the space industry?
It's a very good question. I think maybe each of our panelists can give their comment on this. Should we start with Jacob?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the power of networking and attending events and speaking to people. And I think the more you do that, the more you might discover people who have done this. And it is, I guess, quite rare, but other people could encourage them to take the lead. And I know it is very difficult. I know a few people going through this now, and it is challenging, but I think the people with the determination to do it will succeed. I know on SpaceCareers.uk we have some resources for this already, as I was mentioning earlier, an article on some tips to do it, as well as some interviews with people who have done that. So I think just seeing that is really valuable, that it is possible and they're not trying to achieve something that is not possible. I think they're super valuable to the space industry, bringing outside perspectives as well as outside experience, and just to solving these problems. And I think they can really make a big difference. And I hope if there's anyone listening trying this, that you can carry on pushing yourself and you'll get there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Julia.
Yeah, so I think the giving people confidence, if they're coming from outside the space industry, is an interesting one. I think a very simple thing is stop talking in acronyms. If everyone can make a conscious effort to be more inclusive with how maybe they approach communicating things. I know every single job I've ever had, or even joining a new team within the same company, there's new acronyms, there's new shorthand references, and it is quite alienating. I think in terms of attracting those people, when you post or think like advertise roles, you should really think, does this role really need a very specific knowledge of a specific area of space, or could it be something that you can do and maybe pick up along the way, as part of the space competencies? I think, you know, most of those you can go into a role in software engineering in space, and you don't need to know astrodynamics. You just need to know how to write good code, and you can probably learn the basics of what you're trying to do along the way. And I think maybe making that distinction is really good, to make sure people feel like the skills they are bringing from somewhere else are just as valued as those ones that maybe people have already in the industry.
I think there's very little I can add to those two responses, so I'm just going to echo fellow panelists on that one.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. I think it's been very valuable to hear these points of what needs to be done or continue to be done in terms of awareness and outreach, especially how we communicate it, how we communicate this excitement and share the confidence, and definitely make sure we all speak the same language, at least to get closer and to network. But also that we see a need for a framework and to maintain those scarce skills that are out there and that are needed. It's been very interesting to hear from all of you. Thank you so much to Julia, Jacob, and James for sharing your insights and your experiences. I want to say a huge thank you to the audience as well for participating so much and for asking all these great questions. And thank you for the organizers of GNOSIS for organizing this conference. It's been really, really interesting to listen. So thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your day.